So some of these are actual quotes from other teachers because we kind of posted about this. Well, you did, and then I kind of stole some of the responses from one of our Facebook groups. But here are some tips from music teachers like you. Assume the best, even if you have evidence otherwise.
That's great. Yeah.
Keep a smile on your face and a positive attitude in your heart.
Mhm.
Acknowledge that what you do is awesome and important. Be a positive influence on campus, especially in difficult situations. Show your
Okay.
love for your students and your job. And I would just add to that, be a peacemaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to win a lot more friends that way.
Mhm.
And those
Mhm.
friends could be quite powerful, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're going to be a happier person on your job. You're going to be more sane. So
Oh, who wants to
there.
be happy anyway? Come on now. You're going to have a
Well, we got
long,
to.
prosperous career if you stay happy. You are listening to the Music Ed Mentor podcast, where we teach music educators how to build, manage, and grow thriving school music programs and have long and happy careers. Welcome to episode 5 of the Music Ed Mentor podcast. I am your host, Elisa Jones. You can follow my music education blog at professionalmusiceducator.com, and I invite you to join us in the online Facebook group, Music Educators Off the Podium. This is the first of a 2-part episode where we are talking about one of the most important aspects of your career. It will either make it or break it, and that is your relationship with your administration. In a recent study by grad student Elizabeth Kinsky on music teacher burnout, maybe you actually took her survey, it shows that 49.2% of the music teachers polled don't feel like their administration supports them. And of the top 10 responses as to why teachers experience burnout, 6 out of 10 were issues with their administration. It doesn't have to be this way. But as teachers, we have to recognize that there is little we can do to alter our administration. You really can't change other people. Instead, we have to take the initiative to do what it takes to establish and maintain the relationship on our part. That can be hard to do, but it can be done even with the most frustrating principals and bosses in the education business. For this episode, I bring in choral director and composer Bruce Rockwell. He and I recently researched, compiled, and have curated for you the best advice from music teachers around the world. For the next 2 episodes, we are sharing with you some of the best tips and tricks to make your administrators love you. Enjoy. Okay, so let me welcome on my guest for today. This is Mr. Bruce Rockwell. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Bruce?
Hello. I teach music, and I teach choir and guitar at College Park High School, which is in the East Bay, California, San Francisco East Bay. And I also serve on our district's steering committee, which advises the district administration on their decisions that involve the visual and performing arts. So that's what I'm doing now. I've got a long checkered history we won't have to go into, but I've done a lot of different things and taught at a lot of different types of schools. And I'm also a composer. So I write vocal music and choral music and that sort of a thing. But I'm really happy to be talking about this subject with you. It's something that I kind of realized early on when I started teaching. When you start teaching, you think a lot about what you do in the classroom, and you worry about classroom management, you worry about your rehearsal technique and all this stuff. But then you start realizing that in order to really have a great program, there are things that need to be in place that are around your classroom, different types of supports. And you start thinking about, the vertical alignment of your classes and your course descriptions. And these get into administrative areas. And then, of course, there's, the bigger picture of what your district and your community is doing to support your programs. And so these all are just terribly important things. And I think they don't really teach you about these things in choral methods when you're getting your music ed degree or whatever. But they're incredibly important. So I'm happy to be talking about them.
Yeah, totally true. I think the whole, PR thing in general, that's public relations, getting along with other people, diplomacy, you really don't cover that a lot in music education in the college level. So I agree that, the tips that we're going to give today are going to be super applicable for everybody. I recently, and I'm probably going to address this in the intro as well, but a girl named Elizabeth just was doing a little bit of survey work for her master's degree. And like 50% of the 500 almost respondents said that they do not feel supported by their administration.
Yeah.
And that's just absurd because, we can't change them
Right.
is what it comes down to. You can, bitch and moan all that you want, but there's not much you can do to change your administration. So we've really got to focus in on how can we as music teachers make the changes that are necessary to kind of shift that support. So here we're going to actually start before we get to our 10 ways to make your administrators love you. Mm-hmm. We want to talk about kind of some general tips for working with administrators. And the first one that we want to talk about is you have to have a high quality music program. So Bruce, what do you think that really means?
Well, I would even go a little further and say that you have to have a fantastic music program. You have to have a jaw-dropping musical program, and you can have one at the elementary level, middle school, high school. You have to have a kind of program that's going to be a magnet for support and that is going to have a reputation that precedes it, so that no administrator would dare stand in your way. And, even the ones who don't get it, we talk about administrators who get it and who don't get it. And I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is, well, if you have an administration that you perceive as not getting it, how do you turn them into one that gets it?
Right.
And if you have one that gets it, well, what's the proper care and feeding of your administration? And that's like site administration and district administration as well. But you have to have a really incredible program, I think, because I think the days are gone where we can just have a good program, a good music program where, we have, the old school, you have a fall choir concert and a winter choir concert and a spring choir concert, and you put up the risers and the sound shells and you do your, program of choir music, you put the robes on and then you put them away and then, you meet the standards. And, I just think that we need to get into some of the presentational stuff and the PR and the community engagement. We have one of the only programs on a school campus that can get out into the community and really engage the community and represent the school. So if you have a fantastic program, that's going to be the biggest thing on your in your quiver of arrows in terms of getting your administration to support you.
Yeah, and I think that there's multiple parts to it. You got to have, kids who are excited to come to your class. So that means you've got to have a good rapport with the students. You've got to have musical programming, and this really does come down to the way that you plan your performances. It's got to be engaging to the audience. And as a composer, I'm sure you understand that really well. But I've discovered that in my experience, and I've only been at my school for 2 years, but in just that time, I went from having, the standard group of parents and grandparents coming to performances. But the last performance that I did, it was standing room only, community members, people from the clergy, because I teach at a Catholic school, and it was just outstanding. And that's because I really tried to program it with stuff that not only the kids would love, but the parents would love and the community would love. And you're absolutely right about, getting yourselves out there, writing, it's not hard to send out an email to all of your news organizations with a little heads up that you've got a performance coming. Have you ever done that, by the way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do. I have a PR calendar, a sort of a backwards engineered PR calendar that goes back, 6 to 8 weeks from our events that we send out the press releases to all the local
Right.
press, and we put up posters, and we print up postcards. Digital printing these days is so inexpensive. It's just kind of
Right.
a no-brainer that if you get in 10 more people to your concert, you've just paid for your whole printing budget. It's just not it's not optional to really promote what you're doing, because if you think about the combined human capital, the labor that goes into any concert, it's just incredible how much work goes into what we do. So to
Yeah.
not publicize that to your local community is really not acceptable to me. You really have to do a great job, and you have to make personal invitations to your school board, to your superintendent, to the mayor and the city council, and because their support is vital. And when you get lots of photo ops with the mayor and Santa Claus and whomever, and you get those photos sent off and CC'd to your administration, they take note of that kind of thing.
Right. And we're going to get into that more as we get through our top 10
Yeah.
list. So,
Okay.
so number one has got to be quality programming, quality music, high quality that your school is going to want people to come and see. And also, we want to talk about you've got to understand the job of the administration, the importance of presenting data versus opinions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, because the administrators, they have to perform in the realm of data. They have to perform. That's their world. That's where they have to show progress. And so we have to position ourselves as allies to them in their struggles to better their school and to better it in ways that are going to show up in the data. And so we have to understand what we can bring to the table, because we can bring to the table a lot of great things. Music students have higher attendance rates. That's going to, save the school a lot of money right there. Students tend to have higher GPAs. They tend to have higher college acceptance rates. There's all kinds of data that needs to be used, and it's almost really a kind of a podcast in itself as to how we use data, because it's incredibly important. But there are different types of data that we would use for different purposes and different audiences.
Right. And something I think we forget is that music classes tend to be a much higher, student to teacher ratio.
Oh, yeah.
So we are a far more affordable FTE if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there are administrators who can understand that math, that if they want to cut, music in elementary school pretty soon, they're not going to have, the 70, 60 piece band. They're going to have to hire two teachers to teach electives for those students that aren't going to be in the band anymore, so. Yeah.
Exactly. So hand in hand with data, it's just getting yourself to understand how decisions are made about your budgets, about curriculum, about master scheduling, and that these administrators, they have to be equal to everybody. They can't, well, they shouldn't be favoring any one subject over another.
Right. And you can't expect them to favor you, and you can't expect every time that they tell you no, that this can't happen, that it means that they're not being fair to music or the arts, because they have a lot of irons in the fire. They have and they have limited money to spend. So
and they have a lot of shareholders to answer to.
Exactly. So we have to be pretty savvy about what we want from our administration. A lot of times what is most helpful to me it has nothing to do with money. There are all kinds of things that have to do with the master schedule and different policies about field trips and things that are really important to what I do. But I rarely would ask them for money. And I think this is one of our ten things about kind of being responsible for raising your own money.
Right. And we're totally going to get to
Yeah.
that. Now, you sent me a note here. What, why versus what?
Yeah, yeah, Simon
Explain that
Sinek.
to me.
Yeah, if you listen to the Simon Sinek TED Talk, he has the most viewed TED Talk ever. I mean, now he's got, I don't know, billions in views. I don't know, millions, many millions. He's got the most viewed TED Talk ever, and for good reason, because he really understands leadership in a very kind of profound and usable, practical way. And you need to, see, in the music advocacy community, we've been making this case for decades about how music raises test scores, how about music does this and that, and how music fires the synapses, whatever. We've been making this case, and it hasn't really been working, because that is the what, right? We're trying to. That's sort of like the factual aspects of why music education is good, and that ought to be enough, right? I mean, that
Right.
ought to be convincing, but it's not. You have to convince them why. You have to convince them at a more fundamental level of why music is important, and you have to show it. Which is why I think the PR thing is so important, and social media, and just kind of getting out and showing what you do, and why it's so important to the students, and why it would be helpful to a school and a community and a district to have a greater investment in the arts.
Nice. Well, I will have that TED Talk linked to in our podcast show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, how about that?
Great.
All right. So, now let's jump into the 10 ways to make your administrators love you. So, the first way we want to share is to represent the school well. And we've kind of already touched on this. Have a quality program, get out in the community, ask for, anything that you can that's going to show off what you do for the school. So, let me give you a good example of this. During March, which was Music in Our Schools Month, I did some activities with my elementary kids, like we made little instruments out of straws, and they drove people insane. It was awesome. And then I got on the nafme.org website and actually applied for a little certificate of participation, right? And so the certificate comes in the mail, and I show it to my principal. He's like, okay, what does this mean? I'm like, it means we're getting nationally recognized, right?
There you go. Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
that actually meant something. It wasn't hard for me to do, but it was worthwhile.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a couple things that we've done to represent our school. We perform out in the community as much as we can. We sing for the community, the holiday tree lighting thing downtown that happens every December, and we sing for they have a huge Little League baseball community here that has thousands of kids involved, and they have a big opening day parade where we sing the national anthem, Take Me Out to the Ballpark. We sing for senior luncheons and veterans homes, and so we get them out there, and it's a great experience for the kids, and worthy just to do. But once you're doing them, you really do have to close the loop and make sure that your administration gets photos of that and sees what's going on. If your principal is on the Rotary, sing for the Rotary. And also, since we're a high school, we can sing for the national, the professional sports. So we've sung for the Oakland A's, and we've sung the national anthem for the Golden State Warriors. My students, met Steph Curry afterwards, and
awesome.
And I'm going to be sending around photos of that for the next 10, 15 years, because that, again, we're representing the school to a national audience, and what other part of our school does that?
Yeah, I teach elementary, so I'm not really allowed to take my kids on the road. Mm-hmm. But one of our most important performances we do every November, and we try and do it as close to Veterans Day as possible. And we actually bring in like a bus of veterans and we honor a veteran, and we end up making it this big community event. So rather than us going out to them, they come to us, and we get news coverage, and we get thank you letters, which of course come to me and to the principal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a great way to not only, bring attention to your school and your music program, but to really contribute to the community.
Yeah. And again, it's an amazing experience for the kids. One thing that I would do, you mentioned the certificate. I have asked our mayor, in light of the performing that we do for the community, to write out a similar certificate. And mayor's offices, they love to do this sort of a thing because it costs them nothing, and they get to put on their top hat and be an ombudsman, and they love that. And you could probably even get the mayor to come to your music building, your band room or your choir room, and give you this certificate, and as a kind of a photo op, but it's just a certificate of appreciation for the work that you do for singing for the community, and being a cultural asset to the community. I'm in the process now of having a similar sort of a recognition from our state senator, and a colleague of mine in one of the neighboring communities even got his city council to officially recognize one of the days of the calendar as the choir, the high school choir day, right? We all get, we see those sorts of commemorative days. Well, he got his recognized as the day. So every year he gets to publicize that, and his administration, of course, sees that as a sign of how important his program is to the community.
Yeah, and one of the easiest ways to draw attention, to representing the school well, is to use social media. I did a, really easy, simple arrangement of Home by Philip Phillips. I don't know if you saw that in one of the music teacher groups, and with my kids singing and playing recorder. And I was able to, and I made sure it was all okay that those kids were on camera. There were a couple kids who I had to shoo away. But it's been viewed like 3,000 times. And all I had to do was post it in a couple of music groups and be like, hey, look at this awesome arrangement. And then, of course, music teachers from around the country were asking me, well, can you send me the little bit of sheet music that you used or whatever? And so that was really fun, because then a lot of those kids' parents, they shared it. And so some of these people who, they will never come in my classroom,
Right.
but they were able to see their kids, their grandkids performing on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's the thing. Represent the school well, and let people know that you're representing the school well. So important.
So that brings us to number 2, which is come to your administrators with solutions, not problems.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, sometimes you have to come to them with problems, but I think you should try maybe the 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule, of most of the time coming to them with solutions to their problems. Or if you have a problem, suggest some solutions. And this is just about managing up, really, because if you can just imagine yourself in their position of having 10, 20 fires to put out every day,
Right.
You don't want to just walk in their office and have you and your program be one of those fires. So,
yeah, even if you can come with a handful of options for how to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even if it's a difficult kid in your class, be like, okay, I know this kid's being difficult and I want you to talk to them, or, give them something actionable that you would recommend that could, help solution things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So number 1, again, was represent the school well. Number 2, come to them with solutions, not problems, or at least recommendations. And, number 3, make them feel special.
Yes. And you can do that, especially with musicians. I send my section leaders out at the beginning of rehearsal to sing 4-part version of the Happy Birthday song to staff members who are having a birthday, and that includes administrators. If we know about them, we'll go and do that. That's one of the things that we do We also give them reserved seats at our programs, and kind of just make them feel important. I always thank them in the programs that we have, paper programs that we pass out. And we also, at the end of the year, have my hospitality committee on my choir officers. I have them make up thank you cards for all of our administrators and our office staff and our custodial staff, just to thank them for supporting the choir program through that year. And what's really important is that I thank them even if they haven't lifted a finger for me, even if they're
Right.
one of those administrators who, quote unquote, doesn't get it. I thank them for their help, because A, they probably have helped me in a lot of ways that I don't know. But B, it can only help to thank them and to make them feel appreciated, and to make them feel have a good feeling for your organization, for your program. So it's just, there's a psychology behind that, and I'm going to utilize that. So it's
Yeah.
so thank them, make them feel like their work is really appreciated.
I love the reserved seats idea. I'm kind of, my administrators, they don't like to publicly speak, but for the two big performances of the year where we know we have a whole lot of community members that, aren't parents or grandparents, I like to invite them to speak. And sometimes they're like, are you sure? Don't you want somebody else to? But it actually gives them an opportunity to get up and share some of their own thoughts in a very important way to audience and shareholders who they may not ever get to talk to.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's cool. Mm-hmm. All right. So number 4, stay positive no matter what's going down. And this is a hard one, but really essential.
Yeah, it's very hard. And it takes a professional level of grit to stay positive when you're faced with certain things, because we all are. I mean, it's a stressful profession, but you really have to not only stay positive, but if there are any kind of controversies going around your school, animosities between the teaching staff and the union and the administration or whatever, you've got to try to keep your head low and stay as much out of the out of that as possible, as much as you can bring yourself to try to be objective, or at least not be one of the squeaky wheels that are really causing the problem. I mean, you're really going to help your program out. I mean, there are times that it's worth the fight, and you have to kind of advocate for what's right no matter what. But I think you would do your program better if you're very careful in those situations.
Yeah. So some of these are actual quotes from other teachers, because we kind of posted about this. Well, you did, and then I kind of stole some of the responses from one of our Facebook groups. But here are some tips from music teachers like you. Assume the best, even if you have evidence otherwise.
That's great. Yeah.
Keep a smile on your face and a positive attitude in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledge that what you do is awesome and important. Mm-hmm. Be a positive influence on campus, especially in difficult situations.
Okay.
Show your love for your students and your job. And I would just add to that, be a peacemaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to win a lot more friends that way.
Mm-hmm.
Those friends could be quite powerful, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you're going to be a happier person on your job. You're going to be more sane. So,
who wants to be happy anyway? Come on now. Well, you're going to have a long, prosperous career if you stay happy.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So number 5, don't play the versus game. Don't use other programs in the school use other programs in the school to your advantage, right?
Yes.
Have you had any experience with this?
Yeah, especially sports. Sports is the main, they're huge, right? They're huge on practically every campus. And we can complain about that as much as we want. Yes, it is a completely misplaced priority in our society to put so much money and effort into a field of endeavor that only yields. I was looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and professional sports in this country, I think it was something like there are 15,000 professional athletes in this country, and their median income is only something like $42,000. Um,
Wow.
and and then, for instance, in California alone, the creative jobs, in arts, media, and entertainment, there are close to 1 million of those, and with incomes all over the map. And so for a school to put so much emphasis on sports, it's almost like we're running a professional athletic training program, with so much of our energy and our budget going towards athletics. Yeah, we can complain about that all we want, but we can't fight that. We're not going to fight that, and we're not going to do well forcing our students to try to choose between the sports team and the music that they love and want to do. So, and I know there are different educators with different philosophies, but I would never put my students in the position of having to choose, because I was put in that
Right.
position as a high school student, and I resented it. And it was actually a basketball coach who put me in that position in high school. And I quit. You know,
Right.
I quit the basketball team because he put me in that position, and so I stayed in the band. Right. But,
Right.
so my policy, even for concerts, is that I'm not going to. There's going to be no grading consequences um, for sports conflicts, right? And I have very few. I have very few because the students, the choir, the concerts are of high value to them, and they know. I mean, they know that like a choir concert is going to take precedence over normal practice. Right?
Right.
They know that the playoff game is going to take precedence over a dress rehearsal. So they're good at making these decisions, and I don't make them choose. I don't put them in that position. So that's one thing.
Yeah, it's I think a lot harder in a smaller school having to balance that out when, you have a kid who's on the football team and the wrestling team and plays tuba in the band and,
Yeah, yeah,
but hopefully you've got a real strong team to work with on
yeah.
that. I was very fortunate. I actually have a good example of this. My daughter ran track a couple years ago. Well, she's done it every year in middle school. And she's also like the star tuba player. And our music teacher, she's fabulous. She had no choice but to put like the festival prep concert on the same day as a track meet.
Yeah.
And she had hoped that it was late enough that there wouldn't be any conflict, but my daughter's track event was the last one. And so we hurried, like I even brought her concert clothes. She was changing the cars. We drove to the concert. We got there and they were on their last song.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher was just super cool about it. She's like, no big deal. My daughter's bawling, of course, freaking out, teenagers. And but the band teacher was just super cool about it. She's like, you know what? I know that you're prepared. And it gave the other tuba player a chance to play the solo. And, she just stayed super positive. And I think that's exactly why her administrators love her and will do absolutely anything for her.
Right. Right.
And it may come down to just an individual student situation like that.
Yeah. But it also comes down to programs. We have to realize that the money that they got for the stadium, the multi-million-dollar stadium that they built, and that, they can't afford to give you a budget for, buying sheet music or whatever, that we can't be sucked into that kind of thinking, because that's an entirely different bag of gold that they dipped into for that stadium, and a different budgeting process. And, so again, we can't, it just does not go in our favor to try to fight the sports thing at all, or any of the other activities that are on campus. We just have to be we have to be flexible and keep the lines of communication, especially about scheduling. We can't always know what the playoff games are going to come up or whatever, and there are always going to be those sorts of conflicts. But the more we can get out in front of that, so, we all sit down in the spring and then we all plan our events, and hopefully, the music events don't conflict with sports events or, prom or ball or whatever, but you have to be careful about that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I would say just remember the students. That's really what's most important, and it should be what's most important to us and what's most important to them. And if there are conflicts between teachers, then there are conflicts in you could be pulling a single student apart, and
Yeah.
and we should be there to love and support and care for that student and take our own ego out of the situation too.
Right. And again, if there are little flare-ups between teachers, that's the kind of thing that the administrators are not going to look kindly on, so.
All right, so quick review. Number 1, represent the school well. Number 2, come to them with solutions, or at least options, not just problems. Number 3, make them feel special.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, stay positive no matter what's going down. And number 5, don't play the versus game. I know that was a lot of great stuff, and you're going to want to take it to heart and take action on it throughout your career. We'll be back next time with the next 5 ways to make your administration love you in a couple of weeks. Before we go, I want to make sure you can check out the show notes on the smartmusic.com blog. While you're there, why not sign up for your free teacher account and give it a try? I'm willing to bet you'll want to be using it as a resource very often this upcoming school year. Also, your administrators love it when you get free stuff, so go get some. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and followers. We're all in this thing together, and the more great advice we can share, the better off we're all going to be. You can also access the show notes and downloads by going to professionalmusiceducator.com/podcast. Be sure to leave comments with your advice on how to make your administration love you. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe and leave us a review. It is a total honor to be offering you these resources and support. We'll be back with more great advice on how to make your administration love you in a couple of weeks. Until then, keep teaching on.